Okay, it is March 3rd, 2021, and this is for Nutrition and Dietary Choices today. And today we are going to be doing a Thai red curry with cauliflower. We are in the start of our vegetarian unit this week and next week. So we are looking for healthier alternatives that are also rich in veggies and lots of flavor. Okay, so this recipe is adapted from America's Test Kitchen. It is a book that we have in the classroom that is full of great vegetarian recipes, right? So we're going to be using that today. So we're going to start off talking about the cauliflower itself, okay? Now I'm only going to be doing a half a recipe. So when you guys look at your recipe in Google Classroom, this is a half batch, okay? So because this will make a really big portion. A half size recipe will feed, 3 to 4 people and easily a much bigger crowd if you double this up to the full size, okay? So for cauliflower, you have a couple of options. You can do fresh cauliflower by the head, or you can buy frozen, right? I'm using frozen today. It's just a little bit more convenient for our demo days, and cost is usually a little bit less too. So with the frozen cauliflower, this has already been blanched, right? So before they freeze it, they take it, you blanch it, you put it in hot boiling water, right? And then you shock it in cold water, stops the cooking process, but it already has some water content to it. You can see that, right? You can feel it. So I don't need to add additional water into this recipe because there's already some water in the cauliflower itself, right? You can leave them big chunks. You can make them smaller if you prefer. That's up to you. If you're using fresh cauliflower, right, with the fresh cauliflower, you want to chop up the heads. When you put it in the pan, the recipe does call for a small amount of water, a 1/4 cup for a full recipe. So when you do that, it will help to steam the fresh broccoli. Like I said, we are going to use frozen for this. So I do have set up my little burner over here with my cast iron pan. So we're going to get the heat going on that. And I'm going to put about a tablespoon of oil in. You can use olive oil, vegetable oil, whatever you've got on hand. So 1, 2, 3. Good guesstimate, right? The more you start to cook, the more confident you start to get with that. Like I said, this cauliflower is going to go straight into this pan as soon as this heats up a little bit more. And I'm only going to add just a little bit of kosher salt, okay, at this point. There's going to be lots of flavors getting added into this later. But what I'm looking for is to get this cauliflower cooked all the way through, right? And also to get it a little bit brown and caramelized, okay? Like I said, so we're getting our pan hot. Anything that's really big, I usually just chop in half, but most of these look pretty decent size. So we've got our pan heating up. So this is 1 pound frozen cauliflower, that I pulled them out of the freezer yesterday morning and let them thaw in the fridge overnight. So that way it's a little bit soft. So it's not completely frozen at this point. All right, so that whole thing, a little bit of a sizzle there, right, going into the pan. And just a good generous pinch of some kosher salt. Okay. Now this is going to stay plenty hot. I'm going to keep the pan on high to get it hot and steamy. And then I will lower this down to let it cook and start to get a little bit brown and caramelized. Now we want to get it caramelized some because that's actually going to help bring out more of a nutty flavor to the cauliflower. It adds another layer of depth and dimension. Okay? All right. So now we're going to talk about sauce ingredients. So there's a lot of things that go in this recipe. If you look at the recipe list, right, it's a good size. But everything has a reason, right? We want to add layers of fresh flavors, right? So always use fresh whenever possible. So we're going to start off with some coconut milk. This is going to be the base to our sauce, right? So make sure it's not a condensed milk or anything sugary sweet, just straight coconut milk, okay? And we're using half a can. It would be a full can if it was the full recipe. So this is just over 6 ounces, about 6 3/4 ounces. Okay, so that's our base for our sauce. There's the coconut milk. So we're going to put this into this little bowl here. Now we've got it measured out. And I got a small whisk. You could use a fork. Something to blend all this together. Right? You can hear our cauliflower is sizzling away. Every once in a while, I'm going to give this a little stir. Just to make sure it's cooking evenly. Try and leave it as much as possible in a single layer at the bottom of the pan, right? So everything is cooking at the same rate. Okay. Then we're going to be adding in some fish sauce. So whatever brand fish sauce you like, that's fine. The full recipe calls for 3 tablespoons, so we're going to use 1 1/2 tablespoons of fish sauce. If you wanted to do this as a vegan recipe, you can leave the fish sauce out, okay? And instead, substitute in a little bit of soy sauce. So, coconut milk, a little fish sauce. We're going to add in a little bit of light brown sugar. So 1.5 teaspoons. So I'm just going to do my half teaspoon 3 times. And press that into that spoon. Okay, so you're getting a nice full measurement. There we go. So it'll be 1, 2, and 3. So that gives us just a little touch of sweetness, but not a lot, right? Like I said, it's only 1.5 teaspoons for this. It's just a hint of sweetness to that, which will help balance out some of our other flavors that are going in here as well. Keeping an eye on that cauliflower. Let's stir. Right, and I'll show you at this point, it's just steaming in the pan, okay? So we're trying to get it hot all the way through, and then it'll start to slowly brown and caramelize, and I'll be showing you that. So then we're going to add in, the name of our recipe, right, is a Thai curry cauliflower. So we need the curry, right? So this is a curry paste here. You can buy in the grocery store, right? It's a red curry paste. And this has chili peppers in it. It has shallots, lemongrass, right? So you want to have 1 teaspoon of the red curry paste. So it's very aromatic, but it's also going to give us a really pretty, pale, pinkish color. Right? Yeah. Because our cauliflower is so white and kind of bland looking, this will help give it some prettiness too, right? And a good punch of flavor. All right. Then we're going to be adding in some lime, right? So we're going to use a fresh lime. And we need some lime zest and some lime juice. So the zest is the green on the outside. So make sure your limes are clean, wash them good, dry them, right? I'm going to take just a little bit of this off the outside. So we need about a 1/2 teaspoon's worth. You could use one of those box graters. I'm going to use my little microplane grater since it's easy to do straight over the bowl. But you only want to get that green. So don't go down too hard into the white because that's what we call the pith, and that gets really bitter. So like I said, about a 1/2 teaspoon's worth. Kind of spin your lime as you go. You don't need to get all of it off the lime, but you want a fair amount, right? So when you start getting down to that white, move it around some more. And don't forget the stuff stuck inside, right? Give it a quick tap. It'll come right out, right? So now we've got our lime zest in our sauce. And then we're going to add in some fresh lime juice, okay? So now with this, one thing that's easy is to roll your lemons and limes just a little bit before you juice them. It loosens up the juice on the inside. And we only need about 1.5 teaspoons of lime, so I'm going to squeeze. This is a pretty good size one. Let's squeeze half. So the other half of my lime I could save in the fridge for a couple of days, or I could squeeze it and freeze the juice and save it for another recipe. That way it doesn't go to waste. Right, so we squeeze in half the lime. We've got our coconut milk, our fish sauce, our light brown sugar, our curry paste, the lime zest, the lime juice, and the last ingredient to this is a little bit of crushed red pepper. A little pinch of crushed red pepper for heat. If you like more heat, add more. Okay? Same thing with the curry paste. You can always add more on the curry paste as well. All right, so I'm just stirring the cauliflower here in the pan. And I'm going to set this to the side because we're going to do the last part of our recipe. Okay, now our cauliflower is cooking. You can see it's starting to get a little bit of color on it. Right? We're trying to get it a little bit more brown than that. Now, if your pan gets too dry at any point, add in a little bit of extra oil. A little extra squeeze of oil is perfectly fine. Okay? This is doing good. I'm coming down on my heat to low, letting it get some color. And then in this dish here, we're going to add a little bit of oil, about a teaspoon's worth of oil. Either olive oil or a vegetable oil is fine. And we're going to add in some garlic into this and some fresh grated ginger, right? So it's all about using those fresh, real ingredients. especially when you're trying to cook, vegetarian, you want to have lots of flavor. Okay, so some fresh garlic. So 1 clove of fresh garlic. We're just going to take our knife, right, with the blade away from you. Give it a couple of good whacks. You can do that with a heavy bottom pan as well, right? Look for any dry stuff on the bottom of your garlic clove. Just trim that off. Okay. And then we're going to chop this up. You get any green parts, don't worry about it. Garlic's still fine. This time of year, you'll find garlic tends to try to sprout because it's spring, right? It won't hurt you. If it grows big enough, you could always plant it out in your yard. Right. So we're going to chop up our garlic nice and fine. So I'm just running the knife through. And that other hand on top is always good, right? Keep your fingers out of the way. All right. So now all of this is going to go into our oil. So this is our teaspoon of oil, 1 clove of garlic. And now our almost last, is one little thing later. But our last main ingredient for building out this recipe is going to be some fresh ginger. Okay, so this is ginger root, which smells amazing in comparison to any kind of powdered dry ginger you could ever possibly get. Okay. But the thing is that you have to peel it, all right? So you can take and break off a section, work in a section at a time. But to peel it, use a spoon, right? So you're going to use the side of like your cereal spoon and peel it that way, right? If you try to use a vegetable peeler, you end up losing a lot of ginger because of all these little nubs from the root. This way you're taking off just that peel, and you can get into all those little nooks and crannies with the point of your spoon. This way you're not wasting anything, right? We don't want to waste. And there you go, right? So you can just peel a section at a time, take that off, and put the rest of it back into storage for another recipe, right? So we're going to want about a half a teaspoon's worth of grated ginger, and I'm just going to use my little microplane here. Doesn't look like anything's going in, right? Because it's stuck to the black. That's okay. We're going to tap it out, right? I can see all my ginger right there. Look at that. Okay. Just a little bit more. I like the ginger. So you can go a little extra if you like. All right, so you clean that out so that you're good. And you've got your mixture all set. Right, so we've got our little bit of oil, a little bit of garlic, and a little bit of ginger. Okay, so now I'm going to show you what's happening in the pan with the cauliflower, right? You're going to see that that cauliflower, now that it's had time to cook, is caramelized. It's got a lot of nice rich brown tones, which also give us that little bit of nutty flavor, right, that we want. We want to bring out the flavor. We don't want just bland cauliflower. If I wanted that, I would have just steamed it. So now I'm going to add in the oil, the garlic, and the ginger. And we're adding this in separately because we just want to let that hit the heat of that pan and the cauliflower, right? And let those aromatics come out. We want to make sure that our ginger and our garlic doesn't have a raw flavor to it, right? We want to make sure that it does get cooked. And it takes a few seconds. And then we're going to be adding in our coconut milk sauce, right, with all our other ingredients. Get this stuff, right? Which has been sitting here. And it's good to let it sit for a few minutes too, because now all those flavors have melded together, right? So they've had time to do their thing. All right. So now this sauce is going to go straight into the pan, right? Whole thing. All right, so we added in all of our sauce mixture, okay? And what I'm looking for now at this point is I want to bring this up, the heat up just a little bit, okay, to let this come to a simmer, okay? So we want to make sure that our sauce, all the ingredients are super hot and bubbly, but also that's going to condense and reduce down that coconut milk to make it into a thicker sauce, okay? So it's going to take a minute or so to do that. While that's happening, we got to think about our last ingredient we've got to add in for flavor, which is some basil. Okay? So I've got some fresh basil here. And this is a great time to start your basil seeds, right? So if you grow a basil plant, you'll have it all summer long. Just put it in a nice sunny spot outside or on your windowsill. And these are some huge basil leaves. Basil is very easy to grow, and it replenishes itself. You know, you snip off a few leaves, and you can just keep doing that all summer long, right? So we're going to take a couple of nice big basil leaves here, and we're going to do what's called a chiffonade, okay? So I stack them on top of each other, and I'm going to roll them. Now, while this is happening, my sauce over here is bubbling and reducing, okay? And this is going to be our final ingredient that goes into this, okay? So we're just going to tightly roll these leaves up, okay? This is what we call a chiffonade. So you're going to take your knife, and you're going to go with the basil this direction, right, and go opposite, okay? So like a teeth. I'm going to kind of come a little angle so you can see a little bit more of it. Run your knife through and slice nice thin strips, right? Like I said, this is what's called a chiffonade cut because it gives you these, right? Looks like little basil confetti. And this is going to be our final component that's going into our sauce, right? So I'm going to put that straight in. Also very aromatic, right? So think of all of these things that we put in. Coconut milk, lime, curry paste, right? A little bit of fish sauce, ginger, garlic, right? All fresh ingredients, especially as we're coming into, you know, spring and summer season. These things, the costs on these go down, and some of the stuff you can grow yourself as well, right? And cauliflower, either fresh or frozen, right, is our base. But now it's getting a really pretty color, okay? Look at that. See how it's bubbling, right? Reducing down. That's what we want, okay? I'm going to grab some rice here. Plate. Now, what I did at the beginning earlier is I made some jasmine rice, right? I find that lighter rices tend to pair really well with something like this. So either a jasmine rice or a basmati rice would work. You could use a regular medium grain rice, but this is a good time to kind of mix it up a little bit so you're not eating the same things all the time, right? So I did the jasmine rice in the rice cooker, nothing fancy, right? My little rice cooker right here. And with your rice, you remember it's a 2-to-1 ratio, okay? So 1 part rice, 2 parts liquid. So for every 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of water. You could also increase the flavor in this as well, too, by using things like vegetable broth, right? And still keep it vegetarian. But it'll add a little bit more flavor in depth. Okay? So vegetable broth, a vegetable stock. Letting that reduce down. So I'm going to grab some of that rice. Now, jasmine rice tends to kind of stick and clump together, which is okay. Actually makes it a little bit easier to eat with things like chopsticks, especially for beginners, right? But what you can do is just take your little rice spoon and break it up on your plate. Okay. Like I said, it tends to clump, especially after this has been sitting for a little while. We already had 1 class today. So we have our rice all set up and ready to go on our plate. We want to make a nice little bed of rice because our cauliflower is going to go on top of that. My sauce is thickening up here. So I'm going to show you that finished cauliflower in the pan. Look at that, right? Like I said, super flavorful, aromatic for sure. So I'm going to kill the heat on my stove, and we're going to add some of this right on top of our rice. This is all you have to do to serve it. Like I said, you'll easily get 3 servings out of this at a half recipe, right? So you could easily feed 6 to 8 people, depending on if you do a half batch or a full batch, right? So I'm going to take some of that sauce. You don't want to leave all those flavors behind in the pan. Okay, and then a last little finishing touch is take a little bit more of your basil, right? Take your clean cloth, any little drips, right? That's that restaurant trick. Always make sure a clean towel. Wipe up any smudges. And then take your basil. I took those big leaves to do the chiffonade, but these little tiny leaves here are great for a garnish, right? So take a little sprig of those small little dainty basil leaves, right? And there you go, okay? There is your jasmine rice with some red Thai curry with cauliflower, right? Lots of flavors, lots of aromas. Try and use those fresh ingredients whenever possible. So the ginger, the garlic, right? The fresh lime. But you can get away and cheat by using cheaper, less expensive frozen cauliflower. But use those other ingredients as fresh, and it'll really give you a nice punch of flavor and aroma. Okay? So that's your cauliflower curry for today. Hopefully you guys will try that at home or some variation of. And like I said, it's vegetarian. It would be vegan. The only thing you would need to change is to leave out the fish sauce and swap out soy sauce instead, and you would have a vegan recipe. Right? Happy cooking.